I got another log on the fire, so to speak. This one's another yellow cedar, 16 feet long. Now it's got a lot of taper to it. This top end here is 18 inches in diameter, and the butt down there, it's actually the offcut from the stump, so it is the butt cut, and it's 28 inches in diameter down there. Well, I measured these up to the heart, and then I raised the log up, this end of it up 3 inches, actually 2 5/8, whatever a 2x4 is there, which I stuck edgeways on that table there to raise that log up. And that brings it up to where the heart should be pretty close to being parallel there with the cut. So you got a lot of taper in it. Groundswell in it is another term for it. The old timers, my dad and the other old timberman, lumberman, called it a jug butt in relation to a bottle, a jug, being bigger on the bottom than as it went up. They also use that term to describe some women when they get into a certain condition. Can't say that anymore. A lot of people would cut that off up above that, and in the old days, and you see the old pictures of them when they're using the misery whips and stuff, they would use a whole bunch of springboards and get up above the groundswell like that. And I actually know guys that made a living going down on the west coast in Seattle area and all up and down the coast area, going in and logging those old red cedar butts like that to make them into shake bolts and stuff years after the main loggers came through and logged the trees. But I don't like seeing that much waste. I don't like leaving that much wood on the stump. There's still good wood in that, unless you've got a lot of ring shake in the heart or a heart rot in it. There's no reason in cutting that up above the groundswell when you can cut it off on the mill. So that's what we'll do here. We'll trim that up on the mill, and still got to make some more 2x6's, so that's what we'll do, is plan on those, and maybe another 4x6 or so. We'll see how it goes on that as I cut it down, what it looks like when we start cutting it. And I'm not going to film all of that because it's showery today and rainstorms, showers come over, so I'm going to put the camera in underneath the shed where it won't get wet in case it starts raining. So about ready to start cutting here. Well, the rain's holding off for now, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the camera out here and video this first cut. I'm just about ready to make my first cut. That log, like I said, is 28 inches high. It's 28 inches above the deck, and the maximum height that I can raise that blade to is 24 inches. So my first cut's going to be pretty deep on that end, but this end down here, with it jacked up the way it is, it's only 22 inches. So if I make my first cut at 22 inches, my blade's going to run out on this end, which is not that big of a deal. But I've also only got so deep of a throat on that. I've got to watch out for that. So I'm not sure. Let's see, make my first cut at 22. Yeah, I don't want to waste any more of that wood than I have to. So I'll go ahead and let the blade run out on this end on that first cut, and then I'll have a pretty thick cut on that other end on that slab. But then the next cut that I make, I'll be able to get at least a 1-inch board out of the flitch of the next cut, even if it's only half of the log length. I got the first face cuts made on that log, and I didn't exactly do what I said I was going to do. I was planning on dropping that down to 22 inches and taking that first cut off of there. But anybody that's ever seen any of my videos before knows that it's an anathema to me to waste any of this wood. I like to utilize this some way as much as possible, and that's why I wind up cutting down just as thin as I can on that first cut, and then making 1-inch flitches after that, so I can utilize as much of the wood as possible. Now, not that any of this is going to be wasted. This is yellow cedar, so all of it's going to be utilized. We've used quite a bit of it for raised beds for my wife's flowers and for garden beds and stuff, and I've used quite a few slabs and things like that for scaffolding and other things around here. But even if we don't wind up using it for something like that, the yellow cedar gets cut up for firewood. That's a noble use for that wood as any. It's just that I like to use as much of it for boards as I can. So anyway, I didn't make my first cut quite as deep as I was originally planning. I was thinking about going down to 22 inches and bringing that down, which would have just scraped off the outer cadmium layer on this end of the log, and then making my second cut down below that. Once I got to looking at it, I decided I just dropped that mill down to 23 inches instead of 22 inches and took the first cut off of that. The second cut, I dropped it down to 22 inches, and I got a flitch out of that. I could make a usable board out of it, but it's not very good, but it can be used for something else. It's got a unique grain pattern in it that looks pretty neat. Again, that only took it off about halfway down the log and then kind of just skimmed the rest of it. So the third cut, I went down to 21 inches, and again, I got another flitch off of there that I could make into partially not the full 16 foot, but at least an 8-foot board out of it. But again, it's got some neat grain pattern that could be used for something else. So have to see if we can't figure something out for that. But once I got that down, I had a good face on this log, but there's still too much curve on the log to turn it for a cant. So I took a 2-inch cut off of that, since that's what I'm looking for, is a 2x material out of this as much as possible. So anyway, that one's faced off on that side now. I'll pull that 2-inch cant off of there, stack it up with the rest of these flitches, or that 2-inch flitch off there, and stack it up with the rest of these flitches, and then bring the excavator down here and roll that log over and start whittling on the other side of it. Meanwhile, this is what I got down here. I think that's got some pretty neat grain pattern to it right there where that groundswell was on that butt. You can't see it very well on this side because of the sawdust, but once you get that sawdust off of there, it's got a pretty neat grain pattern on it. You see the grain runs out here, how the growth rings come out on it. That's run out on the grain, and that makes it fragile there, where it'll peel or split right there. But it'd be good, or maybe a chair bottom or something. And then this one is the second cut off of there, and again, that's still got that same grain pattern. Pretty unique grain pattern. Almost wished I'd have had that cut even down lower on the stump, because it really comes out down here on this end. But anyway, I thought that was pretty neat. Even if I can't use it for a board, I have to find some use for that, a plaque or a chair seat or something, and polish that up. We'll get it dried out, planed down and sanded down and polished up, and that'll be a pretty unique piece of wood. Some of these guys that I watch on YouTube that have sawmills are milling up commercially, and they're selling their wood. The population base in this town is just not big enough to justify that for me. There's already 3-4 guys here in town that are commercially cutting wood for people, and I don't want to infringe on that on them. Like I said, the population base is just not that big. And the other thing is, this wood that I've got here is free use wood. It's wood that I got from the Forest Service for personal use, and part of the contract on that is that you can't use it for anything commercial. You can't sell it, so I have to use it myself. I've given wood away to wood carvers and stuff. Oh yeah, here's that slab off of there. That's still got, might even see if I can do something with that, I don't know. So I've given wood away to people for wood carving and stuff like that, some of the natives for their native projects and whatnot, but I can't really sell any of this. Those would make some neat grain, neat patterns on something. Save those out. Even that slab, I cut it off up there about 2 feet or so, and even that is going to make a pretty neat piece of wood. I got that log rolled over and set up. It's all clamped down. I went over it and knocked most of the dirt, all the rocks that I could find off of it. I was surprised. I expected, well, usually the toe board that I put underneath there to raise and lower the one end to adjust for the grain run out, usually that falls out when I roll the logs over. This one, 2x4 on edge on that thing, I thought sure that was going to come out of there, but that stayed there. I also figured for sure that I was going to have to change that out and put something else in there. I didn't think that that was going to line up that way, but once I got it rolled over there and started measuring, it lines up perfectly just like the other one does. Well, it doesn't look like quite as much taper from the butt down, but it comes in more gradually. So I got 23 inches high on this end, on the small end, and 28 on the big end again. So we'll start whittling that one up just like we did the other one. Well, I cut that one like I did the first one for the grain pattern there on the butt. But that doesn't have near the interesting grain pattern as those first two cuts did, so I'll probably still save them. They're still interesting, but like I say, not as good as the first one. Now this one, when I go roll it over, those two cants, that's got the most bulge in it from the bottom up to where we start getting good wood out of it. That was the biggest bulge in that base, so that should have some interesting grain in it. So I'll probably cut those down a little bit for that on those first two cuts before I start cutting all of the slabs off of there. It started sprinkling, so I put the camera away. I went ahead and took the strap up there and turned those cants over, and then I started cutting them. I cut just the top of them off there, that one, because it had a pretty good bulge in it. And I thought I was going to get some pretty neat grain pattern out of that, but once I got it cut, it's not as interesting a grain pattern as I thought it was going to be. This is a 1/2 inch thick piece. Might have been better if it was a full width instead of, these are 6 inch wide. Might have been better if it was a full width. But anyway, it didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to. I went ahead and cut them for that anyway. Yeah, I can still save those. My wife can use them for something, but they're not near as interesting as I thought they were going to be. Anyway, I cut the slab off as small as I could, and then cut a 1/2 inch piece off, and then cut another 1 inch piece off. And then I could see it wasn't going to be what I thought, so I just went down 2 inches. Get rid of the wane on that. I can still get a couple good boards out of that, or usable boards out of it, I should say. But I got it cut down below the wane. I got 14 inches now. I got two 6-inch cants 14 inches deep, and I can start cutting 2x out of those. But I got to change my blade. My blade's starting to get dull. I did a lot of cutting through that garbage wane on there. The rind on that had dirt and stuff on it. And did a lot of cutting through that. That's what happens when I start cutting these things thin like that. If I cut big cants or big slabs off there instead of skinny slabs, I wouldn't be cutting through that wane as much and dull those blades near as much. But anyway, it's starting to pull shavings or pull strings on the other side, and I could tell it was bogging down the mill a little bit more than it should have. So I got it shut down now. I got those cants broke down, ready to cut boards out of them. So I'll go ahead and change the blade and put a fresh blade on there, and then butcher that up. today. I need 32 of those for the deck. So I got 8 and 14, gives me 22. I need at least 10 more of them for that. Then I need some, as I said before, to close in on the top of that roof that I'm going to build over the porch. I think I need about 16 of those. Well, we got some more cutting to do anyway.